It was supposed to be the perfect life. A life where I, Tiana Envaro, an alien maid from the outer colonies, worked in a luxurious human household, serving a billionaire who seemed to have it all. My job was simple enough: clean, cook, and keep the house in order. But what they didn't tell me was that some people don't just have wealth, they have secrets. I stood there staring out the massive glass windows of Blackwell Manor, watching the distant hills of New Geneva fade into the night. The perfect family, the billionaire Thomas Blackwell, his daughter Mira, his mother-in-law Lena, and me. A motley crew, but to the outside world we looked like a picture-perfect family. The garden was always well kept, the house pristine. They had everything: wealth, beauty, health, everything except the truth. From the moment I set foot in this house, I knew I was different. My blue skin, the long, thick hair, the strange alien features that made me stand out even among humans. But it didn't matter. I was here to serve, and at first that was all I cared about. But as the days stretched into weeks, the cracks began to show. I could feel it in the way Thomas looked at me. At first it was just polite glances, formalities. But there were moments, little moments, when his eyes lingered just a second too long. Moments when his touch brushed mine in a way that wasn't entirely necessary. I tried to ignore it. After all, I was just the maid, the one who cleaned his house, not his equal. But that wasn't all. There was the way Lena, Thomas's mother-in-law, treated me. She was always polite, but the coldness was palpable. Every word she spoke to me seemed to carry a weight, like she was constantly evaluating my worth. The quiet sighs when I moved around the house, the subtle grimace when she noticed me helping Thomas. She didn't like me, and I could feel it. She didn't like anyone who wasn't human, especially someone like me. Despite all of that, I did my job. I worked hard. I cleaned every room of the sprawling manor, served their meals, and took care of the details. And as I did, I couldn't help but notice the way Thomas began to rely on me. Not just for the cleaning, but for little personal things, too. His favorite cup of coffee in the morning, a little detail about his daughter that he mentioned in passing. Slowly, he started confiding in me, asking for my opinion on matters that had nothing to do with my job. The more he opened up to me, the more I began to question everything. Was this just kindness, or was there something more beneath the surface? But I pushed these thoughts aside. After all, I had a family to think about. My daughter Mira, who was far away, and my sick mother who needed constant care. I had to stay focused on my work. This job was a lifeline. But then things began to escalate. There was a night when I was serving dinner. It was a typical evening, the family gathered around the table, sharing stories and laughter. I had prepared their meal with care, and as always, Thomas was the center of attention. But there was something different in the air that night, something heavy. Lena was unusually quiet, her eyes narrowing as she watched me move around the room. She didn't say a word as I served Thomas his plate. But I could feel her gaze, sharp and calculating. Later that night, I was cleaning up the kitchen when I heard the doorbell ring. It was strange. We didn't have visitors scheduled. I tried to ignore it, but something inside me urged me to go see who it was. When I opened the door, I wasn't expecting to see a man standing there, dressed in a crisp black suit, holding a thick envelope. His eyes were cold, and when he looked at me, there was no recognition, no warmth, just an evaluation. "You're Ms. Envaro, right?" he asked, his voice smooth but with an underlying edge. "Yes, I am," I replied, trying to keep my composure. "I need you to sign for this," he said, handing me the envelope. "It's from Mr. Blackwell's attorney." I took the envelope, my hands trembling slightly. The message inside was simple, but it sent a cold shiver down my spine. It was a notice for a background check. It was then that I realized no one in this household trusted me, and as much as I tried to convince myself otherwise, I was no longer just an employee. I was a pawn in something much bigger, a game I hadn't signed up for. The next morning, Thomas greeted me as if nothing had happened. But there was something in his eyes that wasn't there before. An unreadable expression, like he was seeing me for the first time. I wondered, for the first time, if I truly belonged here, or if I was simply a tool for his convenience. As the days passed, I started to question everything. Why was I really here? What was Thomas really after? And why did I feel like I was slowly being drawn into something dangerous? My thoughts were a whirlwind of confusion, but one thing was becoming painfully clear. The Blackwell family had more secrets than I ever imagined, and I was about to discover them piece by piece. I think back to when I first started working here at Blackwell Manor, months ago. At first, everything seemed so perfect. I wasn't just any maid in some remote corner of the galaxy. I was in a home that could rival the wealthiest of Earth's families. A house that was more like a castle, complete with marble floors and tall, sprawling windows that made the night sky feel close enough to touch. I wasn't used to such luxury, to be honest. Back on my home world, life was much simpler. My mother, Lena, and I lived in a modest home, a humble little place just outside of the city. But after my mother's health began to deteriorate, I had no choice but to leave everything behind in search of a better future. My daughter, Mira, was still too young to understand why we had to part. I promised her I'd return soon. It was then that I met Thomas Blackwell. He was different from any human I had met before. Polite, courteous, and with a level of charm that could fool anyone. But I never trusted that level of politeness. People like Thomas, billionaires, the ultra-wealthy, they always wanted something more, something no one would expect them to ask for. But what really got to me looking back was how Thomas's family treated me. The way his daughter Mira looked up at me with wide eyes like I was some kind of hero. It was sweet, but there was always a strange undercurrent to it. She was just a little girl after all. Why would she look up to me so much? I never had an answer. And then there was Lena, Thomas's mother-in-law. Lena was the one who struck me the hardest. She was cold like a stone statue. Her hair was always perfectly styled, and she wore clothing that seemed to scream sophistication. Yet every time her eyes landed on me, there was a flicker of something I couldn't place. Contempt, maybe? Fear? I couldn't tell. But it wasn't until much later that I began to notice the little things. The looks exchanged between her and Thomas when they thought I wasn't looking. The way they talked about their perfect lives in front of me, unaware of how their words cut deep. I remember one evening in particular. It was a Sunday night, and Thomas had invited his business associates over for dinner. It wasn't unusual for me to serve dinner to guests, but that night something felt off. Lena was quiet, her eyes flicking between me and Thomas as we moved around the kitchen. Her gaze felt like a weight I could barely carry. I didn't know what was happening, but I could feel the tension between them growing. "Thomas, darling," Lena said, her voice smooth like honey, but sharp in a way that made me uneasy. "Do you really think it's wise to trust someone like her with such important things?" Her words were carefully chosen, but I could tell they were meant to pierce. Thomas, standing near the stove, paused for a moment. His face remained neutral, but his eyes flickered with something I couldn't understand. Was it guilt, or simply indifference? I held my breath, waiting for him to respond. I shouldn't have cared. I was just the maid, after all. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this was no ordinary family. "Mother, I trust Tiana," Thomas said, his voice firm but betraying an edge of something unspoken. "She's proven herself to be trustworthy." Lena didn't respond immediately. She only looked at me again, her eyes like daggers. I wasn't sure if it was a compliment or a warning, but either way, it unsettled me. But there was something else, something even more unsettling, that happened that night. After dinner, I found a small piece of paper left on the counter in the kitchen. It was folded neatly, but there was no name, only an address and a phone number. I didn't know what it meant, but I couldn't ignore the suspicion that crept in. Was this some kind of test? Had Thomas or Lena left it for me? The days passed, and the feeling of being watched became more intense. I tried to shake it off, to focus on my duties. But the truth was, the longer I worked at Blackwell Manor, the more I saw cracks in the perfect image they projected. Lena's influence was everywhere. She controlled the way the house ran, the way the staff behaved, and even the way Thomas acted when she was around. There was no denying it. He was a man trapped by his family's expectations, and in turn, I was forced to live by those expectations, too. I was just a pawn in their game, and I couldn't escape it. One evening, as I was cleaning Thomas's private study, a room I never thought I'd be allowed to enter, I came across something that changed everything. It wasn't the papers I'd been dusting off, nor the rare artifacts scattered across the room. It was a folder hidden in one of the drawers, a folder marked with the Blackwell family seal. Curiosity, against my better judgment, got the better of me. I opened the folder. Inside was a letter, a legal document that made my heart stop. The letter was an official notice, a petition for a contract with the Consortium, a powerful, shadowy organization that controlled the galaxy's medical research. The document detailed a transaction of sorts, one that involved a great deal of money, and as I read further, a much darker proposal. It was clear that Thomas was involved in something far more dangerous than I had realized. But what hit me hardest was the final note on the last page. It was addressed to Lena. "Everything is in place. The Athathurans will be moved soon. Be careful with her. She's the key." The Athathurans? They were a species I knew little about, but one thing was certain: they were highly prized. Their advanced medical knowledge could change the fate of millions. But now I wasn't sure what to believe anymore. The family I had trusted was hiding secrets, and the deeper I dug, the more I realized how entangled I was in their web. What was I to do? What had I got myself into? It wasn't until later, when I saw the same paper on Thomas's desk, with a familiar face circling the contact information, that everything clicked. Thomas Blackwell wasn't just a billionaire. He was a man hiding a much bigger, darker agenda. And I was part of it. The days following the discovery of that document were filled with an unease I couldn't shake. The tension in the manor had grown to an unbearable level. The perfect family facade was starting to crumble, and I could feel it in my bones. What had I uncovered? And more importantly, what was I supposed to do with the knowledge I now carried? Thomas had been distant, though not in the way I expected. His behavior had changed, like a man trapped between two worlds, his eyes clouded with thoughts I wasn't supposed to know about. There were moments when I saw him, deep in thought, staring out into the vast garden as if trying to escape something or perhaps someone. But when I approached, when I asked if anything was wrong, he'd offer a smile, a charming, reassuring smile, and dismiss my concerns as though they were nothing more than passing thoughts. I couldn't ignore it anymore. Whatever was happening, I was caught in the middle. There was too much at stake, not just for me, but for my daughter, Mira, and my mother, Lena. I wasn't sure what I could do, but I couldn't keep turning a blind eye. I had to confront Thomas. I had to know the truth. I was in the kitchen late one evening when I heard the sound of footsteps behind me. I turned, and there he was, Thomas, standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Tiana," he said, his voice steady, "we need to talk." My heart skipped a beat. I had expected this moment, but when it came, it still caught me off guard. I wiped my hands on the towel and nodded, my pulse quickening. "What's going on, Thomas?" I asked, my voice shaking more than I intended. "What's really happening here?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped inside, closing the door behind him with a soft click. He moved toward the counter where I had been working, his gaze never leaving mine. There was an air of finality in his movements, as if everything he was about to say had been carefully planned. "I've tried to keep you out of this, Tiana," he began, his voice low. "I wanted to protect you, protect your family, but I see now that I can't keep you in the dark anymore. You deserve to know the truth." The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I took a step back, trying to steady myself, but I couldn't keep the fear from seeping into my thoughts. "The truth," I repeated. "What truth?" He sighed as if the weight of the secret had been too much to bear for too long. "I'm involved in something much bigger than you realize," he said, his eyes meeting mine, no longer filled with the charm that had once been his mask. "The consortium, they've been after the Atherthurans for years. Their research, their genetic advancements, they can change the galaxy. They can cure diseases, create new technologies, save millions of lives, but the consortium doesn't care about that. They want to control it." I felt a chill creep up my spine. "What does this have to do with me?" I whispered, barely able to get the words out. Thomas's eyes softened, but there was no comfort in his gaze. "You're the key, Tiana," he said, his voice barely audible. "You, your family, Mira, your mother, all of you, you've been part of something bigger than you could ever imagine." I recoiled, the truth slowly sinking in. "What are you saying?" I demanded, my voice rising. "You brought me here for this? You've been using me." He flinched, a brief moment of regret flashing in his eyes. "No," he said quickly, stepping closer. "I didn't use you, but I can't deny the truth anymore. You're part of the plan. I knew it from the moment I met you." I felt my stomach twist. "What plan?" I could barely force the words out. "I never wanted this to be your burden, Tiana, but now that you know, it's too late to walk away. The consortium's going to find out about the Atherthurans. If they do, everything we've worked for will be destroyed. I've been funding their research, I've been hiding them, but it's only a matter of time before they catch up to us." I felt my world tilt on its axis. All these months, all this time spent in this house with these people, it had all been a carefully orchestrated lie. And now I was caught in the middle with no way out. "You're telling me that I've been helping you hide alien scientists," I said, my voice trembling with disbelief, "while pretending to be just a maid in your house." Thomas's face was grim. "Yes, but I never meant to involve you in this. I never wanted you to get hurt." I backed away, my mind racing. The pieces were all falling into place now. The coldness from Lena, the secrecy, the hidden documents, it had all been leading to this moment. But I wasn't sure what to do with this knowledge. I wasn't sure who to trust anymore. The silence between us stretched, heavy and thick. Then something shifted. Thomas took another step toward me, his eyes searching mine. "Tiana, I'm asking you to trust me. he said, his voice raw. I know this is hard to understand, but the Athathuran's research could change everything. It could save millions of lives, and I need you to help me keep it safe. I felt the weight of his words pressing on me. It wasn't just a choice between right and wrong anymore. It was a choice between loyalty and truth, between protecting my family and protecting the galaxy. Why me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Why me, Thomas? Because you're the only one who understands what it means to lose everything, he said softly. You're the only one who knows what it's like to fight for your family. I need you on my side. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time I saw past the billionaire, the perfect facade. I saw a man desperate, a man willing to risk everything for something he believed in. But that didn't mean I had to follow him. It didn't mean I had to risk everything too. I took a deep breath, my hands shaking as I tried to make sense of everything. I can't just forget everything, Thomas. I can't ignore the truth anymore. What you're asking me to do, I don't know if I can. Thomas's face hardened, but there was still something there, something that made me believe he wanted to do the right thing. Then you need to decide, Tiana. You can walk away from this, or you can stay and help me fight for what's right. I stood there, frozen in place. This was it, the moment I would decide everything. The moment I would either betray my family's trust or risk my life and the lives of those I loved. But there was no turning back now. The following days were a blur of confusion and fear. After my confrontation with Thomas, I didn't know what to do. He had told me everything about the consortium, about the Athathurans, about the life I was now unwillingly entangled in. But I still wasn't sure which side I was supposed to be on. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I didn't have the luxury of simply walking away. My family was at risk. Mira, my precious daughter, had no idea what was happening. She was just a child, innocent in all of this. My mother, Lena, was too sick to understand the danger we were in. They relied on me. I couldn't walk away, but I didn't know how to help either. The tension between Thomas and me lingered in the air like a thick fog. We were polite, yes, but the warmth we had once shared was gone. Every conversation was strained. Every glance held a deeper, unsaid meaning. I could feel the weight of his expectations on my shoulders. He had told me what was at stake, but he hadn't warned me about how quickly everything could unravel. It all came to a head one evening when everything I had been dreading, everything I had tried to avoid, came crashing down. I was in the library, dusting off old volumes in a corner of the grand room, trying to focus on the task at hand. It was a small thing, really, a moment of escape from the chaotic reality of my life. The house was quiet, too quiet, and I was grateful for it. The storm outside pounded against the windows, a perfect backdrop for my restless thoughts. Then I heard it. The unmistakable sound of a door slamming open. I froze, heart racing as the echo of footsteps grew louder. I looked up to see Lena standing in the doorway. She didn't speak, but her eyes burned with fury. There was something in her gaze that made my blood run cold. "You've been keeping secrets," she said, her voice sharp like a whip. I swallowed hard. "Lena, I don't." "No more lies, Tiana." She took a step forward, her hands clenched at her sides. "I know what's been going on. I know about the Athathurans, and I know that my daughter's life is in danger because of you." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Lena, please, you don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly," she snapped. "I understand that my daughter married a man who's willing to risk everything, his family, his life, to protect some alien scientists. But do you know what I see? I see a man who's lost control, a man who's become obsessed with something that doesn't matter, and now, because of your involvement, my daughter is going to be pulled into this mess." The weight of her words hit me like a slap across the face. "I never wanted any of this," I whispered, feeling tears well up in my eyes. "I never wanted to put anyone at risk." Lena didn't soften. "You've already done it, and now you're going to fix it." I stared at her, my mind racing. What was she suggesting? What did she want me to do? Before I could respond, the door to the library opened again. It was Thomas. His face was pale, his expression tight. The moment his eyes landed on Lena, the tension between them crackled. He looked at me briefly, then back at her. "Lena," Thomas said, his voice weary, "this isn't the time." Lena turned toward him, her anger not dissipating. "It's never the time with you, Thomas. You've spent so long protecting your little secrets, your precious Athathurans, that you've forgotten what really matters. Our family is falling apart because of you. And now Tiana is caught in the middle of your lies. She's in danger, and I'm not going to stand by and let this continue. Thomas looked at me, his eyes pleading, but I didn't know what he wanted me to do. I had already heard too much. I had already made my choice by not walking away. But now Lena was right. Things had gone too far, too many people were at risk. "Lena, please," Thomas said, his voice barely audible. "This is bigger than us, it's bigger than anything we could have ever imagined. We're running out of time." I watched as Lena shook her head, her face a mask of cold disbelief. "You think you can control this? You think you can control them? The consortium won't stop, Thomas. They'll destroy everything we've built." For a brief moment, I saw the desperation in Thomas's eyes. It was the same look I had seen in my reflection during those sleepless nights, the same look that had haunted me since I first uncovered the truth. He was scared of losing everything, scared of being exposed. And then, in that instant, it happened. A loud crash echoed through the house, the sound of glass shattering. I turned toward the door, and before I could react, the room was plunged into darkness. The power had gone out. The storm outside raged louder, but it wasn't the wind that chilled me. It was the deafening silence that followed. Then came the footsteps, heavy, deliberate, and far too close. I barely had time to move before the door to the library burst open, and a group of masked men in tactical gear stormed inside. I gasped, stumbling backward as they circled the room, their weapons raised. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears, each beat louder than the last. "Get down," one of the men shouted, his voice muffled by the mask. "Everyone on the ground." Lena froze, Thomas didn't move, but I was paralyzed by fear. The reality of the situation hit me like a freight train. The consortium had found us. They had found Thomas, and they had found me. "You're coming with us," the man said, his tone harsh. The words seemed to echo in my ears as I tried to understand what was happening. I wasn't just caught in a family conflict anymore. I wasn't just a maid trying to make a living. I was in the middle of a war that had been brewing for far too long. Thomas stepped forward, his face resolute. "You don't have to do this. You don't understand. This isn't what you think." But the man didn't hesitate. "I understand enough. Move it." And just like that, everything changed. I don't remember much after the men in masks stormed into the library. My heart was still pounding, and my thoughts were a mess of confusion, adrenaline, and fear. I remember the harsh grip on my arm, the cold of the metal cuffs around my wrists, and the sharp orders being barked at us as we were shoved into a transport vehicle. It wasn't until hours later that the fog began to clear, and I found myself waking up in a sterile, white room. The smell of antiseptic filled the air, and the harsh fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. I blinked, disoriented, my mind struggling to piece together the events. My head was throbbing, and my hands were cold, but not from the cuffs this time. My fingers ached from the tension, and my stomach twisted with anxiety. I slowly sat up, wincing as I felt a wave of dizziness rush over me. The room around me was small, the walls lined with medical equipment. I wasn't in a typical hospital room, I could tell that much. The sleek, futuristic designs were a far cry from anything I'd seen before. The soft beep of monitors added to the eerie silence that filled the space. I tried to get up, but my legs felt unsteady. My hands shot out to grab the edge of the bed, and just then the door opened. A man in a white coat entered. He wasn't a doctor I recognized, but something about his presence made me uneasy. He was tall, with dark hair and sharp eyes, and his movements were measured, precise. He didn't speak immediately. Instead, he came over to check the readings on the machines around me. "Ms. Varro," he finally said, his voice calm but cold. "I'm Dr. West. You've been unconscious for the past several hours. The consortium wasn't gentle with you." I didn't answer right away. My mind was still trying to catch up, to make sense of the mess I'd been thrown into. The consortium. They were here in the middle of this mess, and I was just trying to survive. "What do you want with me?" I asked, my voice shaky. The words felt strange coming out of my mouth. I wasn't used to feeling so helpless. Dr. West looked at me, his gaze calculating. "We're not your enemies, Ms. Varro, but I won't lie to you, you're in danger. The consortium knows who you are now. They know you're connected to the Blackwell family." I swallowed hard. It was one thing to know something was coming. It was another to hear it laid out like that. My stomach churned with the implications. "Where'd Thomas?" I asked before I could stop myself. Dr. West's eyes flickered, but he didn't answer immediately. Instead, he motioned for me to lie back down. We've been monitoring your vitals, the shock you've experienced. I'm fine, I interrupted, not wanting to lie down, not wanting to be coddled. The last thing I wanted was to lie in a bed and feel sorry for myself. I wasn't the victim here. You're not fine, Ms. Envaro, Dr. West said firmly, sitting down beside me. Physically, you're stable, but emotionally, you're far from it. The consortium has already extracted information from your family's network. We're running out of time, and you're the key to everything. So listen carefully. His words didn't sink in right away. I wasn't sure what he meant. I don't understand, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Dr. West took a deep breath. Your mother, Lena, and your daughter, Mira, are important, Tiana. You've heard of the Athetherans, right? I nodded, remembering the alien scientists Thomas had been protecting. They're not just any researchers. They're part of a much bigger project, a project that the consortium will stop at nothing to control. And the Athetherans, they're linked to you, Ms. Envaro. You and your family hold something inside you, something they need. I felt my throat tighten. What do you mean, what do I have? Dr. West hesitated. Genetic material, unique DNA, you, your daughter, and your mother. The consortium believes your genetic sequences hold the answers to something critical, something that could change everything for them. They've been hunting you for months. I blinked rapidly, trying to process the information. I felt numb. This was too much. Too many secrets, too many lies. How had my family gotten tangled in all of this? Why had no one ever told me? My family has nothing to do with this, I protested, even though a part of me knew it wasn't true. They were involved, whether I liked it or not. Your family is crucial to this, Dr. West said, his tone growing more serious. Your daughter's genetic makeup is unlike anything we've ever seen before. It's possible that she's the key to curing multiple diseases the consortium wants to control. Your mother was involved in the research decades ago, and your family carries a rare mutation. A mutation that, if studied properly, could change the fate of the galaxy. My mind raced. What does all this have to do with me? Dr. West leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. It's not just your family's survival at stake anymore. If the consortium gets their hands on this genetic information, they'll use it to monopolize healthcare across the galaxy. They'll control who gets to live and who doesn't. I could feel the weight of his words pressing down on me. I had been so focused on surviving, on making it through each day, that I hadn't seen the bigger picture. But now it was clear, this wasn't just about a family dispute. This was about power, about control. We need to get you out of here, Tiana, Dr. West said, his voice urgent. You're a part of something that goes beyond anything we can explain. The consortium is coming for you, and the only way to protect your family is to make sure they never get their hands on you. He stood up, turning to the door. We've arranged for transport, but you need to be ready. They'll be coming for you soon, and we don't have much time. I felt a pang of panic in my chest. What about Thomas? Where is he? Dr. West paused, his hand resting on the door handle. He's in the same situation you are. The consortium isn't just after you. They're after him too, and if they find him, it will be even worse for both of you. I didn't know what to say. Thomas had been a part of this mess. But he was also the one who had protected me, who had fought to keep us safe. Could I really turn my back on him now? Get ready, Dr. West repeated. We leave in 20 minutes. I nodded, my mind racing. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about what kind of world we would leave for Mira, for the galaxy, for everyone. The weight of what I had to do settled over me like a storm, and I knew there was no turning back. I didn't know what I was supposed to feel as I stood there, staring at the sterile white walls of the hospital room. The buzz of the fluorescent lights above me made it feel even more suffocating, as if the world had closed in on me and all that was left was this singular, heart-pounding truth. My family's fate, my fate, was no longer in my hands. I had already crossed a line, and there was no going back. I didn't have much time to reflect on the enormity of the situation. Dr. West had left me with a brief, hurried statement before vanishing out the door. He had been insistent that we leave immediately, that the consortium would be coming for me, and that it was no longer safe to stay. But in the back of my mind, one question gnawed at me endlessly. What about Thomas? Despite everything, despite the secrets and the lies, I couldn't abandon him. He had been the one to open my eyes to the larger fight, even if his methods were flawed. But was it worth it? Could I really continue to stand by him when everything was at stake? As I moved to gather my things, the weight of my decisions felt like an anchor around my neck. I grabbed a small bag from the side table, my few belongings, some old clothes, a small piece of jewelry my mother had given me, the only things I had left. My fingers brushed over the fabric, feeling the rawness of the moment. I had to make a choice that would either destroy or save the people I loved most. Before I could leave the room, there was a knock at the door. I turned, startled. Had they found me already? But it was Dr. West. It was Lena. Her face was drawn, her eyes filled with something I hadn't seen before, fear. There was no trace of her usual composure, no sharpness or coldness in her gaze. Instead, she looked human, vulnerable. "Are you leaving?" she asked, her voice cracking as she stepped into the room. I didn't answer at first. My mind was spinning, and I could barely process the storm of emotions flooding through me. Why was she here? Why had she come? "I need to talk to you, Tiana," she continued, her voice low but firm. "Please just listen to me." I could feel my heart thudding in my chest. Despite everything, despite the secrets, there was still part of me that needed to hear what she had to say. I had spent years growing up under her gaze, and despite everything, she was still my mother's closest confidant. She was family. And family was supposed to be the one thing that anchored me in all of this chaos. "Lena," I said softly, taking a step toward her. "What is it? What do you need?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked over to the small chair by the window and sank into it, her face pale and tired. Her usual elegance seemed to have been replaced by something more fragile. "It's about Thomas," she began, her voice shaking. "I know you've been involved in something much bigger than what we've ever discussed. I've seen it in your eyes, heard it in your voice. The Atherthurans, the consortium, they're all a part of this twisted game. And I've spent my whole life trying to protect my family, but I never saw this coming." I clenched my fists at my sides. "You knew." My voice came out harsher than I intended. Lena looked at me, her eyes full of regret. "I didn't know everything," she said, her voice hoarse. "But I knew enough, and when I saw you getting closer to Thomas, I knew that I had to stop this before it destroyed everything." I wasn't sure whether to be furious or confused. She had known but hadn't said anything. How could she have stayed quiet? "I didn't want to involve you, Tiana," Lena continued, her voice almost pleading. "But now I understand something I didn't before. The consortium, they want to control everything. And they've been using Thomas for years, using our family for years, without us even knowing the full scope of it. They'll use your mother's research, your daughter's genetics, and they'll destroy us all if we don't fight back." I felt my chest tighten as her words sank in. "You knew about my mother's research?" I asked, my voice tight with disbelief. "You knew about the genetic work she did, the research that made me a target?" Lena nodded slowly, her hands trembling. "Your mother worked with the Atherthurans decades ago. I didn't know the specifics, but I knew they were onto something dangerous. I tried to protect her, protect you, but I had no idea what Thomas had gotten himself involved in. He believed in the cause. He believed in the idea of saving lives, of making a better future. But now I see that it's more than just ideals. It's about control, about power." I sank into the chair opposite her, my mind racing. Everything was falling apart, but in the middle of all of this, there was a small, flickering light. Lena, despite her coldness, was finally admitting something. She wasn't just protecting her family anymore. She was trying to help me see the truth. "I want to help you," she said suddenly, her voice softer now. "I want to stop the consortium. I want to stop Thomas from getting lost in this mess." I didn't know what to think. After everything, could I trust her? Could I trust any of them? "You're still loyal to him, aren't you?" I whispered, looking up at Lena. "Even after everything?" Her gaze faltered, but only for a moment. "I am loyal to my family," she said, her voice firm now. "And you, Tiana, are part of that family. You don't have to fight this alone." I sat there in silence, processing her words. For the first time, Lena wasn't just defending herself. She wasn't protecting her own interests. She was offering something more, a way out, a chance to stop everything from unraveling. But there was one thing that still haunted me, one question I couldn't let go of. "Where, Thomas?" I asked, my voice trembling with uncertainty. Lena's face hardened again. "He's gone underground. He knows the consortium is after him, and he's doing everything he can to cover his tracks. But I'll say this, you can't trust him completely, Tiana. He's made mistakes. And now his mistakes could cost all of us." I didn't know what to believe anymore. The man I had trusted, the man I had come to care for, was caught in a web of lies and deception. Was he still the man I had believed in, or was he just another pawn in a much bigger game? Lena's words echoed in my mind as I made my decision. "I'm not running away anymore," I said, standing up from the chair. "I'm going to stop this. I'm going to protect my family, and I'll do whatever it takes." Lena looked at me for a long moment, as if measuring my resolve. Then she nodded, her expression softening just slightly. "We'll do it together." And just like that, I knew my path was set. There would be no turning back. The fight for my family, for our future, was only just beginning. The days that followed felt like a blur of decisions and consequences. What started as a series of small choices, each one building on the other, had now snowballed into a full-blown fight for survival. Everything had changed. No longer was I just a maid in a wealthy household. No longer was I just someone trying to escape the past and protect my family. I was now a key player in a war for something much bigger, control over life itself. Thomas had disappeared. No one knew where he was, though Lena and I had our suspicions. It wasn't until a few days later that I received the encrypted message, a short, terse note from him, telling me to keep my head down and stay safe. But it wasn't enough. He wasn't there when I needed him, and I was starting to see the cracks in everything he had told me. Maybe he had believed in the cause, maybe he hadn't, but the one thing I knew for sure was that we had to end it. We had to stop the consortium before they took everything from us. Lena had come through for me in ways I hadn't expected. For the first time in years, I saw her for who she truly was, not the cold, calculating figure I had known, but a woman fighting for the future of her family. She and I worked together, side by side, in a way I had never imagined possible. We were making plans, contacting people who could help us, and working to get Mira and my mother out of harm's way. I knew the consortium would come for us. They had eyes everywhere, but I couldn't let them have Mira, I couldn't let them have any of us. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about what kind of legacy we would leave behind. We had to fight for the future we believed in, for a world where family, trust, and loyalty still meant something. A world where people like the Athetherans didn't have to hide, and where powerful organizations didn't control who lived and who died. The first step was getting my family to safety. That meant getting out of Blackwell Manor and into a secure location. It wasn't easy. We had to move quickly, quietly. Lena's connections in the outer colonies were invaluable. She knew people, trusted people who could keep us safe, but it wasn't foolproof. The consortium had their spies everywhere. Every move we made, I felt the weight of their eyes on us. But we couldn't live in fear forever. When we finally reached the safe house, I felt a strange sense of relief, but it was fleeting. Because even here, I knew we were far from safe. The battle had just begun. The day I thought I'd never see came sooner than expected. It was the morning after our arrival at the safe house, and we were going over our plans one last time. The room was quiet, filled with the low hum of the emergency generators. Mira was playing in the corner, drawing something on a piece of paper. Her innocence was a sharp contrast to everything that was happening around her. I turned to Lena. "We need to contact the Athetherans. We need to tell them what's happening." Lena nodded, her face serious. "We will, but we have to be careful. The consortium will be watching. They know we're here." It wasn't just the Athetherans that worried me anymore. It was everything, the fact that our lives had been turned upside down by forces we could barely comprehend. The fact that trust had become a luxury none of us could afford. The fact that the world I thought I knew was built on a foundation of lies. But we were going to change that. We spent the next few hours putting together the final pieces of our plan. Lena made the calls, I double-checked the secure channels. We were ready. At least we thought we were. Then just as we were about to leave the safe house, an alarm blared. I froze, my heart pounding. I rushed to the window and saw the flash of lights in the distance. The consortium had found us. "Get Mira," I yelled, grabbing her hand and pulling her toward the back exit. "Now." Lena was already ahead of me, her movements sharp, precise. She'd been in danger before. She knew how to survive. We had one chance to escape. The consortium's forces were closing in, and I knew we couldn't outrun them. But we had something they didn't, each other. I grabbed Mira's hand tighter, pulling her through the back door and into the alley. We had a car waiting. We just had to make it there. The world outside was chaos. The sound of shouts, gunfire, and the hum of machinery echoed in the distance. My heart was racing as I ran, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. Not now. As we neared the car, I felt a sharp pain in my side. I gasped, stumbling as I felt the warmth of blood soaking through my clothes. Someone had shot me. I barely managed to stay on my feet, but Mira's terrified cry cut through the noise, snapping me back to reality. She was clutching my side, her little hands trembling with fear. "Mom," she cried, tears streaming down her face. I didn't have the strength to tell her everything would be okay. I knew it wouldn't be. The consortium had caught up to us, and I didn't know how long we had before they would come for me again. But I couldn't let them take us. I wouldn't. Lena was at my side in an instant. She pushed me toward the car, her face filled with determination. "Get in now." I stumbled into the backseat, and Lena slammed the door shut. "Drive," she barked at the driver. The car peeled out, speeding away from the safe house. But the pain in my side was relentless. The blood was pooling in my clothes, and the world around me began to spin. I wasn't sure how long we'd been driving, but eventually the car slowed. I blinked and found myself lying on a cot in a small, dimly lit room. The driver, a woman I didn't recognize, was standing over me, her hands working quickly, applying pressure to my wound. "You're lucky it wasn't worse," the woman said, her voice calm, "but you're not out of the woods yet." I nodded, too exhausted to speak. I felt like I was drowning in everything that had happened, in everything I had just survived. But the one thing that kept me grounded was Mira. "She's safe, Tiana," Lena said, her voice steady but laced with relief. "We made it." I looked at my daughter, who was curled up in a chair nearby, her eyes wide with fear but filled with hope. She was safe, for now. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "Where do we go from here?" I asked softly, my voice raw. Lena's expression hardened, but there was a spark of something else there. "We fight back, Tiana. We rebuild what's ours." I closed my eyes, the weight of everything pressing down on me. I had seen too much, and I had lost too much to just give up. But I couldn't do it alone. I never had been. "We fight together," I whispered. And for the first time, I felt the faintest glimmer of hope.